the Faith Research Network is dedicated to creating compassionate care models that improve the lives of families through faith-led, system-enabled community health collaborations and support networks. Guided by a reverse research and knowledge mobilization approach, the network develops social prescribing care models that connect individuals and families to community health services aligned with public health priorities. The network's operating system encompasses digital platforms designed to collaborate with voluntary, community, faith, and social enterprise organizations, as well as external partners, to enhance institutional capacity and strengthen community health collaboration. This is supported by a transformational leadership and advocacy program, delivered through community practice sessions and practical toolkits. It works alongside workforce integration as a civic responsibility to build stronger partnerships and improve impact in neighborhoods and local communities.
Hello and welcome, and I'm really pleased that we have Celena McDaniel from Lupus Hub CIC. Good day, Celena.
Good afternoon, Rudy. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm very good indeed. So, Celena, let's start on our lupus dialogue. What is lupus and how does it affect the body?
Lupus is a chronic autoimmune illness, meaning the white blood cells that are there to protect the person's body from germs, infections, has gone a bit overactive and a bit confused, and have decided that the person's organs are also what they would class as the enemy. And what that does is it turns your immune system on yourself, meaning that it will attack in particular organs of the body that it decides it doesn't like, leaving behind inflammation, damage, and a lot of pain.
And what are the common signs and symptoms of lupus that people should be aware of?
Oh, gosh, lupus is so very varied, but I think what a lot of people find as a common symptom of lupus will be fatigue, really severe fatigue or lethargy, joint and muscle pain. You will also have skin rashes, in particular those that are brought on by exposure to sunlight, especially if it ends up being across the nose or the cheeks, which is where they get the butterfly rash from. Low-grade flu-like symptoms or low-grade fever, that's just there constantly for no particular reason. That can be another sign of, an autoimmune illness or lupus itself. Hair thinning or hair loss, and a very common organ that gets affected by lupus tends to be the kidneys. So then you'll get maybe very dark urine or, urine with maybe a little bit of blood in it. So those are some common symptoms of lupus.
Okay, and there's a level of joint pain, I think, as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. A definite level of joint and muscle pain. It just seems that there's particular connective tissues that lupus just decides it doesn't like. And when that happens, it just ends up being a very painful situation, because it will attack it and it will leave behind the inflammation and the associated pain.
Which groups are at most risk of developing lupus, and why are African and Caribbean communities disproportionately affected?
Right. So when it comes to a lupus diagnosis, they say approximately 8 out of 10 people diagnosed with lupus will be a lady of Black or African, beg your pardon, will be a lady of African or Asian descent of childbearing age. How it comes about, a lot of it they kind of attributed to environmental, hormonal changes, periods of stress. It could be to do with, a lot of sun exposure. However, what is starting to really leak out, and what I kind of thought from I was diagnosed and also my sister, is that repressed anger or repressed stress has got a lot to do with eventually ending up with a lupus diagnosis or a chronic illness diagnosis. There's a study done by the oh goodness me, it's called the Black Women's Experience of Living with Lupus. It's called the Be Well Study, and that was done, I think, last year or the year before. And that definitely underpins the effect of chronic stress, current or epigenetic stress as well, as a factor for developing lupus. It just seems that because women, has been given that role of the caretaker, we tend to caretake everybody else to the exclusion of ourselves. We are more likely to sit down in stressful situations and repress our feelings towards it, and if that is anger or, just sucking it all up and keeping going on, then eventually our immune systems will believe that it's under so much attack, even though there isn't a physical attack, that it then turns around and gets a bit upset and confused and goes a bit haywire and then decides to attack us as a result.
So how is lupus diagnosed, and what challenges do patients face in getting an accurate diagnosis?
Boy, a lupus diagnosis, a lot of the time, is delayed, simply because doctors have not been educated on what lupus is, how it presents. They haven't even been educated about the illness itself, to be honest. I had a beautiful rheumatologist, and she was very honest with me. I don't know if it's changed now, but up until about 20 years ago, a rheumatologist, which is a person that studies rheumatic illnesses, inflammatory illnesses, and she said, we go to a lupus symposium once every 3 years for a weekend. So not only is there no relevant studies being done, even if they are being done, they haven't been passed down to rheumatologists like that. So a lot of the time a lupus diagnosis depends on a wing and a prayer, because there is no definite, diagnostic test to say, okay, we look at your blood, it's got XYZ in it, it's definitely lupus. It's not like that. Again, it really comes down to whether the doctor that you are attending or the GP that you're attending even has that in mind, to understand that that's a possible diagnosis. And then the next problem is how to actually diagnose it, because, they will give you different tests that will just mark whether your immune system is overactive or underactive, or how it's overactive. And the problem with that is lupus, as an autoimmune illness, can mimic any other autoimmune illness you can think of. I think the only definite standout symptom of lupus that may, then turn around and cause you to think it's lupus as a doctor is if you're highly sun sensitive. And even then, that's not a definitive, it's not a definitive symptom, because not everybody with lupus is sun sensitive. So that is the real difficulty in trying to understand how to get your diagnosis. And unfortunately, I'll be very honest, because lupus is an illness that mainly affects Black and brown women, there hasn't been a lot of push in this country to, do a lot of research to find out how can I put it, how to treat us, to put it bluntly. And I'll be very honest again, because I've got to be fair, because lupus is such a very, very, very individual illness, it presents as something else in everybody. As I like to say when we do our event, everybody in our audience can have lupus. We may have 3 or 4 symptoms in common. However, it's going to differentiate quite widely across the rest of the way. Some people, it can only affect their joints. Some people, it may give them neurological symptoms. Some people, it could be that it doesn't like their kidneys. Another person, it could be their heart. Some people, it could be their eyes. Some people, it could be the eyebrows on the left side or the toe on the right side. It doesn't really have a set level of symptoms, Anywhere your immune system can go is where lupus can go. And if it decides that it doesn't like a part that it goes to, then this is where, you will get the pain, the inflammation. But the problem is, as I said, that can mimic so many other illnesses.
Of course.
This is where that headache really does become apparent.
It certainly does suggest that within our own community, amongst our professionals and those with lived experience, that we have to carry out more research
Absolutely.
and really get a handle ourselves on what makes us feel better with some of these long-term conditions.
Absolutely. And the research starts with finding out how many people are living with lupus in the UK, because at the moment they don't know.
Yeah, well,
You know?
that's our responsibility to find them, I think.
Oh, yeah,
Our
definitely.
community's responsibility, our professionals, greater professional collaboration, of course. So finally then, Celena, what treatment and management options are available for people living with lupus, and how can communities support them? So in a sense, we just touched on that. How can families and communities do more to support people living with lupus? So there's 2 or 3 questions in there.
Again, because there has been a very limited amount of research, unfortunately, when it comes to lupus treatments, we get thrown stuff to kind of hopefully alleviate the symptoms. So, they go to is steroids because they want to depress your immune system so it doesn't overreact. That in itself brings a whole host of problems, including, endocrine shifts and weight gain, and which will eventually lead to diabetes and, those kind of problems. Then you have a set of drugs that were kind of used for anti-malarials. How that works and how it works for lupus, I have no idea. But apparently that's one of the set of drugs that have kind of been thrown our way. We have other drugs such as hydroxychloroquine, which I think is the beg your pardon, the anti-malarial drug. You have biologics that are kind of recent, and those ones are there to actually modify your immune response. And again, for me, I've taken most of them and I've got a big old red line through most of them because my body just doesn't seem to like chemicals. It may work for a little while on me and then it will just basically freak out. My immune system just goes absolutely haywire. So for myself, I've realized that when it comes to treatment, in an acute situation, I'll be the first to tell you, go to the hospital, Yeah. However, any rheumatologist worth their salt will tell you we can only manage the symptoms. It takes for lifestyle changes to really to be able to live well when it comes to having, lupus. And that's where, taking note of what makes you flare. That is a really, really
I was going to
important.
ask you about that in terms of what have you found generally that makes you feel well? What do you What do you eat? How do you get on with life?
It's funny. I always said that it was chicken and chips that gave me lupus and rheumatoid, and you know what? It actually worked out to be true. I read a book called "Eat Right for Your Blood Type," and yeah, for my blood type, when you eat such things like chicken and vegetables from the nightshade family, it causes lupus or autoimmune illness.
Yeah.
So it's just understanding, as I said, what causes your triggers. So if you eat certain foods and you find that you flare, sometimes it's really hard to understand what that can be because the triggers can come from anywhere. It can be environmental. It could be that, you are around a person, as weird as it sounds, and their energy is just no good for you, But, especially if it's a family member, you kind of get told, well, you've got to kind of be nice to your family because don't do it at the expense of your health. I'm very sorry. Don't do it. If it's not for you, it's not for you, or you're going to have to learn how to manage being around that person in a better way than you have been doing. So I think living well with lupus comes down to understanding your particular lupus, and that takes a lot of self-study and introspection and honesty. Because again, you may find that, being around the partner is what's setting you off. If you've decided you want to stay with that partner, then you're going to have to either find a way to work with them or understand that you're going to be in pain and it's going to make your illness maybe worse. For myself, as I said, going back to diet, I was vegan for quite a while.
Right.
I just found that
Did
it
that help?
worked for me.
Did that help when you
Yes,
went
absolutely.
vegan?
Yeah. And I don't think it was more the case of the meat itself, it's what they added to the meat. So all the
Chemical.
additives, the hormones, the pesticides, and those are the things that I realized just made my immune system be a bit more in a hyper alert mode. Also for me, I found that gluten. And again, whether it's the actual gluten itself or what they've added to the wheat and how they've GMO'd it and done all kind of foolishness to it, it just goes into my system. My body can't recognize it as anything natural and goes into, we're on search and destroy mode. And unfortunately, sometimes I get caught in the crossfire.
Of course.
You
So in terms of community support now, where would you like to see enhanced community support now?
Definitely awareness. I can't tell you how many places I've been to, how many events I've had, and I've met people that's got close family members with lupus, that have lupus themselves. And, their first question is, what is it? Oh, I've heard of it, but what is it? And like,
So it's understanding is the challenge. And so we've got the
exactly.
awareness, like other long-term conditions, we've all heard of them, but it's the
Exactly.
understanding and
Of
then
what it is. Yeah.
what are
You
we
can
going
have
to
a
do about
person
it?
you could have a person with sickle cell, and you just know it's sickle cell, the sickled blood can clump and it can cause pain and blockages. But when it comes to lupus, it's so much more of a very unique illness in its presentation.
Mm.
A lot more awareness is needed just for the people that are living with it, their caregivers, their loved ones, and the medical staff, can just provide a bit more understanding
Okay.
of how it can be. So I think raising the awareness, number one, is one of the most important things.
Mhm.
How can they be supported after that? Ask questions, and don't get me wrong, again, I do know in our community there is this don't ask, don't tell kind of attitude to a lot of things. If we want to survive and live well with lupus, we're going to have to get past that.
Of course.
We really are going to have to get past that. And I do believe it's also training or educating people on how to ask questions. Because you know what? Having you've got pain in your skin and then having what's wrong with you, that's not going to help you.
Yeah, of
That
course.
attitude, you're not going to get a real good response from that.
Yeah,
So it's
got
just,
to
I think,
improve the advocacy within our own.
yeah, it's about the advocacy and the understanding of how to maybe approach a person,
Exactly.
But overall, I would say raise awareness from, the service user or the patient down, definitely. Because again, it's all right being asked a question, but if you can't even answer how you're feeling, that's another scenario. So
Absolutely.
I
That's,
think definitely create an educational course
mm.
of what lupus is for everybody to be able to kind of understand it.
Yeah, and we just need to record more of the lived experiences to
Definitely.
improve our understanding and those thoughts of how people have been able to live better with the condition, share that as well.
Yeah.
So great. So in terms of if anyone's interested in contacting you at the Lupus Hub, CIC, could you just give us some details before we go?
Right. So if you need to contact me, you can book in a care call on my Calendly link, and that will be at www.lupushub.org. I am also on, oh good grief, TikTok, the Lupus Hub, also on Instagram, the Lupus Hub. And if you want to contact me personally, it's Celena McDaniel, and that's on LinkedIn.
Right. So thank you very much, Celena, and you take care.
You as well. Thank you very much.